At the alien daycare, no one could stop the crying, until a human janitor did a magic trick. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. In the bustling Galactic Hub Station, nestled between trading posts and diplomatic offices, sat the most prestigious interspecies childcare facility in 3 sectors, where the fate of galactic peace would soon rest in the most unlikely of hands. The Galactic Hub Station floated in neutral space, a massive structure of gleaming metal and translucent polymers that served as the central meeting point for over 200 sentient species. The station was shaped like an enormous wheel, rotating slowly to provide artificial gravity, with spokes extending from a central hub where most administrative functions took place. Countless ships docked and departed daily, bringing diplomats, traders, scientists, and families from across the known galaxy. Near the outer ring, in a sector specially designed for family accommodations, was the Stellar Tots Interspecies Daycare Center. It wasn't just any childcare facility. It was the most prestigious in 3 sectors, a shining example of the Galactic Alliance's commitment to fostering understanding across species from the earliest developmental stages. The center occupied a generous portion of the station, with specially designed environments to accommodate the needs of young ones from dozens of different worlds. The daycare was a marvel of environmental engineering, with rooms that could adjust temperature, gravity, atmospheric composition, and light spectrum in seconds. Some areas were kept at scorching temperatures for the fire-dwelling Pyrolians, whose offspring resembled flickering flames. Others were chilled to near freezing for the crystalline frost titan younglings. Aquatic chambers housed the young of water-breathing species, while low-gravity play areas accommodated those from lighter-gravity worlds. Director Kaltura Vex, a tall, slender being with pale blue skin and 4 arms, had run the facility for over 15 standard years. Her species, the Corellans, were known throughout the galaxy for their exceptional organizational skills and unflappable temperaments, qualities that had served her well in managing the chaos of interspecies childcare. She took immense pride in the center's reputation, in the delicate balance she maintained between the needs of such diverse beings. On this particular morning, Kaltura sat in her office, reviewing the day's enrollment data on a holographic display that floated before her. The gentle hum of the station's systems provided a familiar background noise as she moved information around with graceful gestures of her 4 hands. New arrival today, she murmured to herself, examining the file of a human child recently registered to the center. Interesting. Humans were still relatively rare on the station. Though they joined the Galactic Alliance only 30 standard years ago, they had quickly earned a reputation as adaptable and resourceful, if somewhat unpredictable. Their children, however, remained something of a mystery to most non-human caretakers. A soft chime from her communication system interrupted her thoughts. "Director," came the voice of her assistant, "the ambassador of Proxima Centauri has arrived for the tour." Kaltura stood, smoothing her formal robes. "Send them in, please." The doors to her office slid open silently, revealing a delegation of 3 Centaurians, tall, elegant beings with iridescent skin that shifted colors with their emotions. Their current blue-green hue indicated a mix of curiosity and slight apprehension. "Ambassador Zill," Kaltura greeted, bowing slightly in the traditional Centaurian manner. "Welcome to Stellar Tots. We are honored by your presence." The tallest of the Centaurians returned the bow. "Director Vex, the honor is ours. As our world considers joining the full Galactic Alliance, the matter of childcare facilities for our diplomats and staff is of great importance." "Of course," Kaltura said with a practiced smile. "Shall we begin the tour? I believe you'll find our facilities exceed all galactic standards for safety, education, and cultural sensitivity." As they left the office, Kaltura felt a small flutter of pride. The Centaurians were notoriously selective about their associations, and their potential membership in the Alliance had been in negotiation for years. If they were impressed by the daycare, it could positively influence their final decision, a diplomatic coup that would reflect well on her management. Little did she know that within hours, everything she had carefully built would be thrown into chaos, and the fate of interstellar relations would rest in the hands of the most unlikely person on the station. Down in the maintenance levels of the Galactic Hub Station, far from the gleaming corridors and diplomat-filled conference rooms, Ethan Cole reported for his first day of work with a mixture of trepidation and resignation. The maintenance chief, a bulky Urson with thick brown fur and small, intelligent eyes, looked down at the employment file on his tablet with evident skepticism. Human, the Urson rumbled, his translator device giving his growls a slightly mechanical tone. Not many of your kind in station maintenance. No, sir, Ethan replied, standing straighter. At 32, he was already considered middle-aged by the standards of some of the longer-lived species on the station. His short brown hair was already showing flecks of gray at the temples, and faint lines had begun to form around his eyes. But I've got 5 years' experience in similar systems on the Europa colony. The Urson, Chief Grex, according to his name badge, made a sound that might have been a laugh or a grunt of disapproval. It was hard to tell with Ursons. Europa's a water moon with a few thousand humans. This is Galactic Hub Station. We've got 200 species here, each with their own environmental needs, waste disposal systems, and mechanical quirks. Grex tapped a clawed finger against the tablet. Says here you were a teacher before. What happened? Students drive you to maintenance work. Ethan's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Career change, he said flatly. Wanted to see more of the galaxy. Chief Grex studied him for a long moment, then shrugged his massive shoulders. Well, the Alliance Equal Opportunity Employment Act says I've got to give you a shot. You'll start with basic cleaning duties. Station janitor. He handed Ethan a small electronic device. This is your work assignment pad. It'll tell you where to go and what to clean. Follow its instructions exactly. Some areas have specific environmental protocols. Ethan took the pad, nodding. It wasn't what he'd hoped for when he'd left Earth, but it was a job, and right now, that was what mattered. One more thing, Grex added, his small eyes narrowing. Stay out of the upper levels unless you're specifically assigned there. The diplomats and their families don't like maintenance staff disturbing the atmosphere. Got it, Ethan confirmed, tucking the pad into his pocket. Good. Report back here at the end of your shift. With that, Chief Grex turned away, clearly considering the conversation over. Ethan consulted his assignment pad, which directed him to begin with the lower cafeteria levels. As he walked through the utilitarian corridors, he couldn't help but compare his current situation to where he'd been just a year ago. A respected elementary school teacher with a small apartment in Denver, a job he loved, and a life that made sense. Now, here he was, billions of miles from Earth, about to clean up after aliens who probably couldn't even pronounce his name correctly. The irony wasn't lost on him. As he reached the cafeteria and began to unpack the cleaning supplies from a nearby maintenance closet, he allowed himself a small, rueful smile. His students would have found this hilarious. Mr. Cole, who had once taught them about the wonders of the universe, now scrubbing the floors of an actual space station. He pulled out a mop-like tool with cleaning solution that adjusted its chemical composition based on the type of mess it encountered, far more advanced than anything he'd used on Earth. At least the technology was interesting. All right, he muttered to himself as he began to clean a sticky purple substance from the floor. One day at a time, Cole. One day at a time. Little did he know that his carefully planned new existence was about to be spectacularly derailed by forces beyond his control, or that his old skills would soon prove far more valuable than his new ones. The Stellar Tots Interspecies Daycare was normally a model of organization and calm. Director Kaltura Vex prided herself on the facility's ability to handle any situation, from magnetar tantrums, which could disrupt electronic equipment within a 50-meter radius, to the occasional acidic secretions of frightened Xenopian toddlers. But on this particular morning, something unprecedented was happening. It began in the Nebula Room, a spacious playroom designed for species with similar atmospheric requirements. A young Arcturian child, whose species resembled small blue humanoids with large, pupil-less silver eyes, had started crying. This wasn't unusual in itself. Young ones of all species had their moments of distress. What was unusual was that the crying didn't stop, nor was it contained to just the Arcturian child. Within minutes, a Florian infant, whose plant-like body produced musical tones instead of tears when distressed, began emitting a high-pitched keening. Then a pair of Vulcan twins, whose emotional states were always synchronized, started wailing in perfect harmony, their normally bright orange skin darkening to a deep crimson. By midday, the situation had spread to every room in the facility. Young ones of every species were expressing distress in their unique ways, crying, shrieking, secreting various fluids, changing colors, emitting unusual odors, or in the case of the telepathic Mindari children, broadcasting waves of sadness that affected everyone in their vicinity. In the director's office, Kaltura Vex was facing the most challenging crisis of her career, made all the more critical by the timing. The Centaurian delegation was due to return for the second part of their tour in just 3 hours. "Have you tried the universal calming protocols?" she asked the assembled staff, her normally composed voice tight with stress. All 4 of her hands were in constant motion, alternating between typing on her console, adjusting her communication device, and nervously straightening items on her desk. "Yes, Director," responded Trill, a Paraconian caretaker whose feathered body was currently molting from anxiety, a problem in itself, as Paraconian feathers contained mild hallucinogens. "We've attempted every calming method in the official manual. Sound therapy, light modulation, comfort pheromones, gravitational adjustments, even the emergency suites distribution. Nothing works," added Morva, a stocky Talarian whose stone-like skin was etched with glowing patterns of concern. "The distress seems to be spreading from child to child, regardless of species barriers or isolation protocols. It's as if they're connecting through their upset." Kaltura's skin had paled to an almost white shade, a sign of extreme stress and querulence. "This is unprecedented. Have we checked for environmental contamination, sonic disturbances, psionic interference? All systems are functioning normally," confirmed the facility's AI through the room's speakers. "No abnormal readings detected in any environmental systems." "The Centaurian ambassador will be here in less than 3 hours," Kaltura said, stating what everyone already knew. If they see the facility in this condition, not only will their application to the Alliance likely be withdrawn, but we could face a complete shutdown pending investigation. She looked around the room at her staff. "We cannot allow that to happen." Just then, the door to the office slid open, and in rushed Zeph, a young Aquarian caretaker whose transparent skin revealed the rapid movement of fluorescent blue fluids, a sign of intense emotion in her species. "Director, the Luminary infant has begun to glow at distress frequency. If they reach critical luminescence, evacuate that wing immediately," Kaltura ordered, rising to her feet. "Deploy light dampening fields. We cannot have a repeat of the illumination incident of last year." As the staff rushed to comply, Kaltura made a decision. "Contact Central Station Management. Request emergency assistance. We need experts in xenopediatric psychology, emotio-environmental specialists, and..." She hesitated before adding, "Notify the diplomatic corps that there may be a slight delay in our scheduled tour." As her staff dispersed, Kaltura remained standing in her office, staring out the viewport at the stars beyond. In 15 years of running the most diverse childcare facility in known space, she had never faced a situation like this. Her reputation, the facility's future, and potentially even broader diplomatic relations hung in the balance. And somewhere, in the midst of hundreds of distressed alien children, the solution to the problem was about to arrive from the most unexpected source imaginable. Ethan's first day as a janitor on the Galactic Hub Station was proving to be less eventful than he'd anticipated. The work was straightforward, if occasionally puzzling. Some of the substances he cleaned up defied Earth physics, like the liquid that flowed upward against gravity or the crystalline residue that played tiny musical notes when disturbed. By midday, he had worked his way through most of his assignments, finding a certain satisfaction in the simplicity of the tasks. There was something calming about cleaning, about taking a chaotic space and bringing order to it. It didn't require the emotional investment of teaching, the constant concern for young minds and hearts. Just clean, wipe, dispose, repeat. His assignment pad chimed, displaying a new task: maintenance request, Stellar Tots Daycare Center, fluid spill cleanup, Priority Level 3. Ethan frowned at the screen. The daycare center was definitely in the upper levels, the domain of diplomats and their families that Chief Grex had explicitly warned him to avoid unless specifically assigned there. But this was a specific assignment, so he supposed it was allowed. The pad provided directions, and Ethan made his way to the nearest lift, his cleaning cart in tow. As the lift ascended through the levels of the station, the utilitarian corridors of the maintenance areas gave way to the more aesthetically designed upper levels, with their soft lighting, living plant installations, and art pieces from various worlds. When he reached the level housing the daycare center, Ethan immediately noticed something was wrong. The corridor outside the main entrance was crowded with station security personnel, medical staff, and what appeared to be diplomatic aides speaking urgently into communication devices. Approaching cautiously, he showed his assignment pad to a harried-looking security officer, a tall, insectoid being with compound eyes that reflected Ethan's image back at him multiple times. "Maintenance," Ethan explained. "I was called for a cleanup." The security officer's antennae twitched. "You'll need to wait. We have a situation." Before Ethan could ask for clarification, the doors to the daycare center slid open, and a striking blue-skinned being with 4 arms emerged, surrounded by staff. Even with his limited experience with alien species, Ethan could tell from her body language that she was in the midst of a crisis. "Need solutions, not excuses," she was saying, her voice melodic despite its sharpness. "The Centaurian ambassador will be here in less than 2 hours, and we still have no explanation for why every child in the facility is in distress." Ethan's ears perked up at this. Every child? In distress? His teacher instincts, dormant but not forgotten, stirred to life. The 4-armed director noticed him hovering with his cleaning cart. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Ethan Cole, maintenance," he replied, showing his assignment pad. "I was called for a cleanup." "The Xenopian secretions." "Yes," she said distractedly. "Third room on the left in the east wing. But be quick and try not to disturb the children further. They're already distressed enough." Ethan nodded and wheeled his cart through the doors as they reopened. The moment he entered the daycare center, he was hit by a cacophony of sounds, wails, shrieks, musical tones of distress, and other noises he couldn't even categorize. The air was filled with unusual scents, some pleasant, others decidedly not, and the lighting seemed to be fluctuating in response to the emotional energy in the space. Following the directions to the east wing, Ethan passed room after room of upset alien children, each expressing their distress in species-specific ways. Caretakers moved between them, attempting various soothing techniques with little success. In the third room on the left, he found a harried-looking caretaker attempting to comfort a small, gelatinous being while simultaneously trying to contain a puddle of gently sizzling purple fluid on the floor. "Maintenance," Ethan announced, wheeling his cart in. "Oh, thank the cosmic forces," the caretaker said, her relief evident despite her alien features. "Careful with that secretion. It's mildly corrosive to standard flooring materials." Ethan nodded, selecting the appropriate cleaning solution from his cart. As he worked to neutralize and clean up the purple fluid, he couldn't help observing the room's occupants. There were about a dozen young aliens of various species, all showing signs of distress. The caretakers moved among them with increasing desperation, trying everything from soft lights to gentle sounds to what appeared to be scent dispensers. Nothing seemed to be working. As he finished cleaning the spill, Ethan noticed one particular child, a small, humanoid being with luminescent skin that was currently pulsating with distress. The child sat alone in a corner, emitting soft hiccuping sobs that somehow cut through all the other noise in the room. Before he could stop himself, Ethan found himself walking over to the child. "Hey there," he said softly, kneeling down to be at eye level. "That's quite a light show you've got going on." The luminescent child looked up at him with 3 wide, silver eyes, momentarily surprised by the new presence. The pulsating of their skin slowed slightly. 15 years of teaching elementary school students had given Ethan an instinct for distressed children, regardless of species. And right now, that instinct was telling him that these kids weren't just having individual meltdowns. There was something systemic happening. He looked around the room more carefully. Despite the different biology of the children, he recognized patterns in their behavior, the seeking of corners and quiet spaces, the covering of sensory organs, the rocking motions. It reminded him of how his Earth students would react to overstimulation or sudden changes. As he finished his assigned cleanup and prepared to leave, Ethan felt a tug of concern. These weren't his students or his problem. He was just the janitor now, here to clean up messes and move on. And yet, as he pushed his cart back toward the main entrance, he passed the director again, now surrounded by an even larger group of staff and what appeared to be specialists of some kind. Tried recalibrating the atmospheric composition, checked for subsonic frequencies. Could be a collective empathic response. The blue-skinned director looked increasingly distressed herself, all four of her hands moving in agitated patterns. The ambassador will be here in 90 minutes, she was saying. If we cannot resolve this situation by then, the diplomatic consequences could be severe. Ethan hesitated, then, against his better judgment, cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said, raising his voice slightly to be heard over the discussions. Several alien faces turned toward him with expressions ranging from surprise to annoyance. The human maintenance worker, the director, identified him, her tone suggesting she had more important things to deal with. "Is the spill cleaned up?" "Yes, ma'am," Ethan replied. "But I couldn't help noticing the children's behavior, and I have a theory about what might be happening." There was a moment of silence. Then several of the aliens exchanged glances that Ethan interpreted as skeptical, amused, or dismissive, depending on the species. "You have a theory," repeated one of the specialists, a tall being with metallic scales and a voice like wind chimes. "About xenopediatric mass distress syndrome." Ethan stood his ground. "I was a teacher for 15 years back on Earth. Specialized in elementary education, kids aged 5 to 11. I've seen collective behavior like this before." The director studied him for a long moment, her skin shifting through several shades of blue. "Finally," she said, "the situation is already critical and conventional approaches have failed. I am open to unconventional perspectives." She gestured for him to continue. Encouraged, Ethan set aside his cleaning cart. "From what I've observed, the children are showing signs of sensory overload and security distress. On Earth, this kind of collective response often happens when there's been a significant change or disruption to routine. Has anything changed recently in the daycare's operation?" The staff exchanged glances again, but this time they seemed to be considering his question seriously. "We did implement the new harmonic ambient system 2 days ago," offered one of the caretakers hesitantly. "It's supposed to create a soothing background frequency that's pleasant to all species. And we changed the cleaning solution for the play surfaces to a new formula," added another. "More efficient and ecologically sound. The meal distribution system was upgraded last week," a third chimed in. "It now anticipates nutritional needs based on biometric readings." Ethan nodded slowly. So multiple changes to their environment, all at once. For young children, of any species, I guess, that's a recipe for collective anxiety. They can sense that things are different, but they don't understand why or how, which creates a feedback loop of distress. The director's eyes widened slightly. "But our changes were all improvements, designed to enhance the children's experience. Children don't always experience change as improvement, even when it is," Ethan explained. "They find security in routine and familiarity. Too many changes too quickly can be overwhelming, especially in a multi-species environment where they might be picking up on each other's stress signals." There was a thoughtful silence as the daycare staff considered his words. "So what do we do?" the director finally asked, a note of cautious hope in her voice. "We cannot simply revert all of our systems in the next hour." Ethan thought for a moment. When Earth children are overwhelmed by change, sometimes the best approach is distraction, something novel and engaging enough to break the cycle of distress. Once they're calmer, you can gradually help them adjust to the new routines. "Distraction," repeated the metallic-scaled specialist, sounding dubious. "We have attempted various entertainment protocols already." "Not entertainment," Ethan clarified. "Connection. Something that creates a moment of wonder or surprise, something that reaches them on an emotional level." The director looked at him with all three of her eyes focused intently. "And can you provide such a connection?" Ethan hesitated. He had come to the station to escape, to find anonymous work that didn't involve the emotional investment of teaching, to create distance, to heal. But the sounds of distressed children, even alien ones, pulled at something fundamental in him. And there was something else, too, a tiny spark of the passion that had once defined his career before circumstances had driven him away from it. "I might have an idea," he said finally, "but I'll need a few supplies," and he glanced down at his janitor's uniform. "Maybe a quick introduction as something other than the maintenance guy." The director checked the time on a holographic display that appeared above one of her wrists. "You have 60 minutes to prepare. I hope, for all our sakes, that your idea works, human." Ethan nodded, already mentally inventorying what he would need. "So do I, director. So do I." With less than an hour before the Centaurian ambassador's return, the Stellar Tots Interspecies Daycare Center was in a state of controlled chaos. Director Kaltura had ordered all available staff to gather the children, still crying, shrieking, glowing, and otherwise expressing their distress, into the Central Activity Dome, a large, circular space with adjustable environmental conditions that could accommodate all species simultaneously. The dome's ceiling was currently set to display a gentle star field, rotating slowly in a pattern that research had shown was calming to the majority of species. The floor was covered with various comfortable surfaces, soft for some, firm for others, heated or cooled as needed. Normally, it was a space for interspecies games and gatherings. Today, it was their last hope for salvaging the situation. Ethan had been given access to the daycare supply storage and had quickly gathered what he needed. Now, standing in a small preparation room adjacent to the dome, he was arranging these items in his pockets while trying to ignore the butterflies in his stomach. It had been over a year since he'd stood before a group of children, since he'd taken on the responsibility of engaging young minds. A gentle chime sounded, and the door slid open to reveal Director Kaltura, her blue skin now an even paler shade than before. "The ambassador's shuttle has docked early," she said without preamble. "They will be here in 20 minutes. Are you prepared?" Ethan took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." "Then please, follow me." She led him toward the central dome. "I must inform you that the reputation of this facility, the potential membership of Proxima Centauri in the Galactic Alliance, and possibly my entire career now rest on your abilities." "No pressure," Ethan muttered. "Indeed not," Kaltura agreed, missing the human sarcasm. "The pressure is quite extreme." As they approached the entrance to the dome, the sounds of distressed children grew louder. Kaltura turned to face him, all four of her hands clasped together in what Ethan recognized as a gesture of formal respect. "Human Ethan Cole, former educator, current maintenance technician," she said solemnly. "I entrust to you the most precious beings in our care, and with them, our future. May the wisdom of your species guide you." With that rather dramatic statement, she activated the door controls, and the entrance to the dome slid open. The scene inside was even more chaotic than Ethan had anticipated. Hundreds of alien children of various species were gathered in the space, their distress creating a cacophony of sounds, scents, lights, and even some localized weather phenomena from species whose emotions affected their immediate environment. The caretakers moved among them, their own stress evident in their postures and movements. They looked up with expressions of surprise and confusion as Ethan entered, still wearing his maintenance uniform, but now also carrying a small bag of supplies. Director Kaltura stepped forward, raising her voice to be heard above the noise. "Attention, little ones and caretakers. We have a special visitor today who wishes to share something with you. This is," she hesitated, then continued, "Professor Ethan from Earth, who has traveled many light years to bring you a demonstration of human, cultural practices." Ethan stepped forward, feeling hundreds of alien eyes and other sensory organs turned toward him. The noise didn't immediately diminish, but there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a hint of curiosity penetrating the distress. "Hello, everyone," he began, his teacher's voice automatically projecting to reach the back of the room. "I'm very happy to meet you all today." He looked around at the sea of alien faces, some humanoid, others completely different from any Earth form. Some were covered in fur, scales, or feathers. Others glowed, pulsated, or shifted form. Yet despite their alien appearance, he recognized the universal expressions of childhood distress. "I understand things have been a little overwhelming today," he continued, moving slowly into the center of the dome. "Sometimes, when I feel overwhelmed, I like to see something amazing, something that reminds me that the universe is full of wonder and mystery." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple deck of playing cards, standard Earth cards that he'd found in the station's recreation supplies. It wasn't the most sophisticated prop, but it would have to do. "On Earth," he explained, beginning to shuffle the cards with practiced movements, "we have a tradition called magic. It's not real magic, like some species can do. It's just tricks and illusions. But sometimes, a good illusion is exactly what we need to remind us that not everything is as it seems." The shuffling cards created a rhythmic sound that seemed to catch the attention of many of the children. Some of the crying began to quiet as they watched his hands move. Ethan launched into one of the simple card tricks he used to perform for his Earth students on special occasions. He made cards appear and disappear, found chosen cards through sleight of hand, and performed basic flourishes that sent cards dancing between his fingers. Gradually, the noise level in the dome began to decrease. The alien children, their distress momentarily forgotten in the face of this novel human behavior, began to focus on his performance. Even those species whose sensory organs were very different from human eyes seemed captivated by the movement and rhythm of the cards. Encouraged, Ethan moved on to other simple tricks from his classroom repertoire, making small objects vanish by palming them, creating the illusion that he was pulling colorful scarves from nowhere, performing simple coin manipulations that made the metal discs seem to multiply and vanish at will. "And now," he announced, sensing the growing engagement of his audience, "I need a volunteer to help me with my next magic trick." Hundreds of alien appendages, hands, tentacles, paws, claws, and things Ethan had no name for, shot into the air. The children who had been wailing in distress minutes ago were now eager to participate, their species-specific signs of excitement replacing those of distress. Ethan pointed to a small, fuzzy being with large eyes who was practically vibrating with enthusiasm. "You there, with the beautiful purple fur. Would you like to help me?" The child bounced forward, emitting a series of chirps that Ethan couldn't understand but interpreted as agreement based on the body language. "Excellent. Now, I'm going to need to borrow something small from you. Do you have a toy or object you could lend me for the trick?" The child reached into what appeared to be a pocket and produced a small crystalline sphere that glowed with a soft inner light. "Perfect," Ethan said with a smile. Now, everyone watched closely. With the practiced movements of someone who had entertained hundreds of children over the years, Ethan performed a classic disappearing object trick, making it seem as though the crystal sphere had vanished into thin air before finding it behind the child's ear equivalent. The reaction was immediate and extraordinary. The purple-furred child emitted a high-pitched sound of delight, and the watching children responded with their own species equivalents of gasps, laughter, and applause. The dome filled with a symphony of joyful sounds, glowing lights, and pleasant scents as the alien children expressed their wonder and excitement. Ethan continued with more tricks, each one building on the last, incorporating volunteers from different species, and gradually creating an atmosphere of shared amazement that transcended biological differences. He found that even without understanding the specific biology or culture of each alien child, he could connect with them through the universal language of wonder and surprise. As he performed his final trick, a complex illusion involving all four of his volunteer assistants simultaneously, Ethan became aware of movement at the entrance to the dome. Glancing over, he saw Director Kaltura entering with a group of tall, iridescent beings whose skin shifted through beautiful patterns of color. The Centaurian delegation had arrived. But instead of the disaster this might have been an hour ago, they were witnessing something remarkable. Hundreds of alien children from dozens of species, completely enraptured by a human performing simple magic tricks, their earlier distress entirely forgotten in the shared experience of wonder. As Ethan concluded his performance to an explosion of alien applause and other expressions of approval, he saw Director Kaltura's face. All three of her eyes were wide, and her blue skin had taken on a deep, vibrant hue that he guessed signified profound relief or happiness. The tallest of the Centaurians leaned down to speak to her, their iridescent skin pulsing with what appeared to be curiosity and interest. Kaltura nodded, then gestured toward Ethan, beckoning him over. With a final bow to his enthusiastic audience, Ethan made his way through the crowd of now-content alien children, many of whom reached out to touch him or his magic props as he passed. Ambassador Zill, Director Kaltura said as he approached, her voice rich with newfound confidence. May I present Professor Ethan Cole of Earth, our special cultural consultant. The Centaurian ambassador regarded Ethan with multifaceted eyes that seemed to shift color as they studied him. Most fascinating, they said, their voice melodious and ethereal. In all my travels, I have never witnessed such a universal response from so many different species simultaneously. This magic practice of yours, it appears to transcend biological and cultural barriers. Ethan, still holding his deck of cards, gave a respectful nod. Magic tricks are just illusions, Ambassador. But the sense of wonder they create, that seems to be universal. Indeed, the ambassador agreed, their skin rippling with a pattern that somehow conveyed thoughtfulness. Our species values practices that create connection across differences. We had concerns about how our children might integrate into the Galactic Alliance, but seeing this, they gestured toward the dome full of contented alien children, many of whom were now attempting to imitate Ethan's card shuffling with various appendages, is most reassuring. Director Kaltura's relief was palpable. Then you are still considering joining the Alliance? More than considering, Ambassador Zill replied. I believe we shall accelerate our application. Any community that can transform distress into such harmony through the simple sharing of cultural practices is one we wish to join. The ambassador turned back to Ethan. Professor Cole, would you be willing to provide a demonstration of these magic tricks to our own childcare providers on Proxima Centauri? Before Ethan could respond, Director Kaltura quickly interjected. Professor Cole's schedule is quite full with his important work here at Stellar Tots, but I'm certain we could arrange something. Ethan glanced at her in surprise, but the look she gave him clearly communicated, play along. It would be my honor, Ambassador, he said with a polite nod. As the ambassador and their delegation moved further into the dome to observe the children, now engaged in peaceful play and attempts at magic, Director Kaltura turned to Ethan, all four of her hands clasped in a gesture he now recognized as profound gratitude. Human Ethan Cole, she said, her voice low and intense. You have saved this facility, possibly improved galactic relations, and certainly preserved my career. I do not understand how your simple manipulations of paper cards could accomplish what our most advanced calming technologies could not. But I am deeply grateful. Ethan shrugged, a bit uncomfortable with the praise. Kids are kids, no matter what planet they're from. Sometimes they don't need advanced technology. They just need to be distracted from their worries and reminded that the universe can still surprise and delight them. Kaltura's eyes narrowed slightly as she studied him. You said you were a teacher on Earth. Why are you working in station maintenance? The question hit a sore spot, and Ethan's expression closed slightly. It's complicated. The director seemed to sense his reluctance. Well, whatever the reason, I believe your talents are being wasted on cleaning duties. She straightened, her posture becoming more formal. I would like to offer you a position here at Stellar Tots, as our human cultural specialist. The salary would be considerably more than your current maintenance compensation, and you would have your own living quarters in the upper residential section. Ethan blinked in surprise. I wasn't looking for a new job. Perhaps not, Kaltura agreed. But it appears that the job was looking for you. Consider it, at least. She gestured toward the dome full of content alien children. It seems you have a gift that transcends species barriers. That is rare and valuable in our community. Before Ethan could respond, they were interrupted by one of the Centaurian delegates, who had a question about the facility's educational curriculum. Kaltura excused herself to address it, leaving Ethan standing alone, watching the scene before him. Across the dome, alien children of countless species were interacting peacefully, some showing each other their attempts at shuffling cards, others mimicking his hand movements from the magic tricks. The caretakers moved among them, their earlier stress replaced by relieved smiles, nods, and other species-specific expressions of contentment. For the first time since leaving Earth, Ethan felt a sense of purpose stirring within him. The weight of the past still pressed on his shoulders, but perhaps here, billions of miles from home among beings who knew nothing of his history, he could build something new, something meaningful. He felt a tug at his uniform and looked down to see the small purple-furred child who had been his first volunteer. They held up what appeared to be a crudely folded piece of paper, offering it to him with a hopeful chirp. Taking it gently, Ethan unfolded it to find a colorful drawing that seemed to depict him performing his magic tricks, surrounded by happy alien children. The artistry was childlike, but unmistakable in its message of gratitude and joy. "Thank you," he said softly, kneeling down to the child's level. "Would you like to see one more magic trick?" The child chirped excitedly, their large eyes shining. As Ethan reached into his pocket for the deck of cards, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time. The simple joy of connecting with a child's sense of wonder, of making a difference, one small moment of magic at a time. Perhaps Director Kaltura was right. Perhaps this was exactly where he needed to be. 3 months later, the Stellar Tots Interspecies Daycare Center had undergone significant changes. Most notable was the addition of a new wing dedicated to what had been officially named Cultural Exchange and Wonder Studies, but which most of the station's residents simply called the Magic Room. The room itself was a marvel of design, with areas catering to the various needs of different species while maintaining an atmosphere of shared experience. The walls were lined with displays showing cultural practices from hundreds of worlds, not just Earth magic, but similar traditions of wonder and surprise from across the galaxy. At the center of it all was Ethan Cole, no longer in a maintenance uniform, but dressed in comfortable Earth-style clothes, currently demonstrating a new trick to a rapt audience of alien children. His hair was neatly trimmed, the shadows beneath his eyes had faded, and there was an ease to his movements that hadn't been there when he first arrived on the station. "And now," he announced to his audience, "watch carefully as this ordinary piece of paper," he held up a sheet for all to see, "becomes something extraordinary." With practiced movements, Ethan folded the paper through a series of precise creases. The children watched in fascination as the flat sheet gradually took shape, becoming a complex origami bird. With a final flourish, he held it up, then gently tossed it into the air, where hidden anti-gravity emitters he had installed in the ceiling caught it and made it appear to fly around the room of its own accord. The children erupted in their various species expressions of delight: chirps, glows, color changes, scent releases, and more, as the paper bird soared overhead. From the entrance to the room, Director Kaltura watched with a satisfied expression. Her blue skin had taken on the rich, deep hue that Ethan now recognized as her equivalent of a pleased smile. "Most impressive, Professor Cole," she said as she approached, using the title she had officially bestowed upon him when creating his new position. "The Galactic Education Committee representatives were most impressed by your demonstration yesterday. They are considering implementing similar cultural exchange programs in educational facilities throughout Alliance space." Ethan smiled as he guided the paper bird back to his hand with subtle gestures controlling the anti-gravity field. "I'm glad they liked it. Though I still think Professor is a bit much for what I do." "You underestimate the impact of your work," Kaltura replied seriously. "Since implementing your program, we have seen a 73% reduction in interspecies conflicts among the children, a 41% improvement in cross-cultural communication metrics, and an 89% decrease in mass distress incidents." "They're just having fun," Ethan said modestly. "Kids are naturally curious. My tricks just give them something to be curious about together." "Perhaps," Kaltura acknowledged. "But in a galaxy often divided by biological and cultural differences, creating shared experiences of wonder is no small achievement." All 4 of her hands made a graceful gesture that indicated profound respect. "The Centaurians have officially joined the Alliance, by the way. Ambassador Zill specifically cited your cultural demonstrations as a key factor in their decision." Ethan shook his head, still sometimes bemused by how his life had changed. From Earth teacher to station janitor to cultural ambassador in less than a year. It wasn't the path he had expected, but perhaps it was the one he needed. As the children dispersed for their midday meal, Ethan began cleaning up his supplies. One child lingered behind, the small, purple-furred being who had been his first volunteer months ago. Ethan had since learned their name was Trill, and they belonged to a species called the Lamari, known for their empathic abilities and artistic talents. Trill approached shyly, holding another drawing. Unlike the first crude attempt, this one showed remarkable skill, depicting Ethan teaching a diverse group of alien children how to perform simple magic tricks themselves. "This is beautiful, Trill," Ethan said warmly, kneeling down to accept the artwork. "You've really improved your technique." The child chirped happily, then hesitated before pulling something else from their pocket. A small deck of handmade cards with colorful designs on the back. "You want to show me a trick?" Ethan asked with an encouraging smile. Trill nodded enthusiastically, then with small furry hands began to perform a simple card manipulation that Ethan had taught the class the previous week. The execution wasn't perfect, but the concentration and pride on the child's face made it special. "Excellent," Ethan praised when Trill successfully completed the move. "You've been practicing." The child made a series of musical chirps that Ethan had come to recognize as their way of expressing gratitude and happiness. After Trill had left to join the other children for mealtime, Ethan remained in the now quiet room, looking at the drawing in his hands. It captured something essential about what he had created here, not just entertainment or distraction, but connection. A bridge between different worlds, built from shared wonder. Director Kaltura reappeared at the doorway. "The ambassador from Andromeda 7 has requested a private demonstration of Earth magic for their diplomatic entourage tomorrow," she informed him. "They are considering sending their royal children to Stellar Tots, which would be quite a coup for our facility." Ethan nodded. "I'll prepare something special." As Kaltura turned to leave, she paused. "Oh, and the station's Cultural Enrichment Committee has approved your proposal for the Interspecies Talent Showcase. You'll have the main auditorium for the children's performance next month." "That's great news," Ethan said, already mentally planning how to help each child showcase their unique abilities while creating a cohesive show. The kids will be thrilled. Left alone again, Ethan walked to the large viewport that made up one wall of the room. Beyond the transparent material, the vastness of space stretched out before him, stars twinkling against the endless dark. Somewhere out there, billions of miles away, was Earth, the home he had left behind, carrying wounds that had finally begun to heal. He thought about the path that had brought him here, about how the skills he had developed teaching Earth children had found unexpected new purpose among the stars, about how a simple deck of cards and some sleight of hand had changed not just his life, but potentially the course of interstellar relations. The universe, it seemed, had its own kind of magic, the kind that could transform a broken-hearted teacher into a bridge between worlds, the kind that could turn grief into purpose, isolation into connection. Ethan smiled to himself as he watched a passing starship through the viewport, its lights blinking as it approached the docking area of the station. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new alien dignitaries to impress, new tricks to develop that would work for the unique biology of dozens of species. But for now, in this quiet moment between the wonder and the work, Ethan Cole, former Earth teacher, former station janitor, current professor of human cultural studies, and unofficial magician to the stars, felt at peace with his place in the vast, magical universe. As he turned away from the viewport, his eyes fell on the small storage cabinet where he kept his most treasured possession, a photograph of his Earth classroom, 24 smiling human children surrounding their beloved teacher on the last day of school. The day before the accident that had claimed half of those young lives and sent Ethan fleeing across the galaxy, seeking escape from unbearable grief and unwarranted guilt. He had not opened that cabinet in months, had not looked at those faces that once haunted his dreams. Perhaps someday he would be ready to face them again, to honor their memory without drowning in sorrow. For now, it was enough to know that they were part of what had made him who he was, the teacher who found himself teaching again, bringing joy to children of the stars. With practiced movements, Ethan shuffled his deck of cards, the soft sound filling the quiet room. The simple action centered him, reminded him of who he was and what he could offer. Tomorrow would bring a new audience, new challenges, new opportunities to create wonder. And in a universe vast beyond comprehension, sometimes the most powerful magic was simply the ability to make someone smile, to create a moment of shared joy that transcended all differences. It wasn't saving the world, but perhaps, in its own small way, it was helping to build a better one trick at a time. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.